Hi everyone, this is the acyuta-bhava from Nightlight Astrology, and these are your sun and rising sign horoscopes for the month of June 2020. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at the earth signs, Capricorn, Taurus, and Virgo. So the big news of the month is that it is eclipse season again, and there are two eclipses happening this month. For Capricorns, which is where we're going to start with, probably the most important eclipse is going to be the solar eclipse that falls in Cancer, because that's in an angular house opposite to your own home sign. So that's kind of where I'm going to be focusing for Capricorns today. But the mutable signs like Virgo are also getting hit particularly hard by the eclipses because they fall in angular houses if you're a mutable sun or rising sign. So anyway, the eclipses certainly should be affecting the earth signs this month. And we have some good things to say about Taurus too. Anyway, so at the beginning of the month, the first major moment of the month happens right around June 3rd, when we have a uh, cazimi from Venus. Venus is at the heart of the sun on June 3rd in your sixth whole sign house for your Capricorn rising. And the sixth house was traditionally a place of hard work, misfortune, accidents, injuries, sickness. But it is also a place where we fight for something, or we may even give ourselves sacrificially for something. For example, the sixth house was traditionally associated with military service. Um, the Venus retrograde that you've been experiencing, if you're a Capricorn rising in your sixth house, has a lot to do with you could say, a process of reevaluating important relationships, creative partnerships, or even, your intimate romantic relationships. And it may not be easy. You may be in a bit of a slog right now because the sixth house is not an easy place to be doing any kind of Venusian work. The sixth house was traditionally called the joy of Mars, Venus's natural planetary opposite. And so Venus retrograde in this house will typically have to do with breakdowns and challenges in relationships. So they could be professional. Venus is your professional house ruler. They could be creative. Venus is your fifth house ruler of creativity. It could also be sexual, romantic, or just interpersonal in general. But the great news about Venus cazimi is that there's a bit of a breakthrough. This is the turning point of Venus's retrograde cycle, where Venus becomes empowered as she starts transitioning to become the morning star. So watch for some moment of breakthrough, clarity, and a silver lining or some good fortune to start turning up relative to the Venus retrograde process that I've just been describing. So that happens on the 3rd. Now, if we go forward to the 5th, that's when we're going to have the first eclipse. And this eclipse is taking place in Sagittarius, in your 12th house. Not an easy place for an eclipse. The 6th and 12th house axis in general was considered to be very difficult from the standpoint of ancient astrology. Of course, both houses were called metakosmios by the ancient astrologers, which means a world in between worlds. The 12th house was associated with the labor pains of a woman in about to deliver a baby. And so the 12th house, as this in between world of pain and suffering, of breakdown, of dissolution, of sometimes surrendering something or letting go of something or having something taken from us, um, is not an easy house. But the eclipses in this house usually suggest that the breakdown is necessary, that it's fated, that it's beyond your control, and that allowing for whatever needs to fall away right now to fall away is going to be the best strategy for success. I don't mean to make it sound more ominous than it is. Some 12th house eclipses are deeply interior and emotional, and there's just an inner realization of something within ourselves that needs to be let go of, or that's no longer serving us. But sometimes it's also going to coincide with outer things. For you this month, those outer things are probably specifically tied into relationships, or maybe even relationships and family simultaneously. We say that because for Capricorns, this lunar eclipse, remember the moon rules your seventh house, which is the place of relationships. And of course, you have some other big eclipses happening, another big eclipse happening in Cancer later in the month that will also emphasize the themes of family. So that might be those might be some of the specific themes that you notice with this 12th house eclipse. And if we go forward from here, from the 12th to the 13th, there is a Mars-Neptune conjunction taking place, and Mars is actually T-squaring the Sun and Moon at the time of the eclipse as well. This is happening from the third house, which is a place related to the mind. Mars and Neptune in the third house, again, are raising the question of how much of myself can I sacrifice? Whenever I see Mars and Neptune conjunctions, in the third house or somehow related to Mercury, you get a Mercury Neptune or Mars Mercury Neptune combinations, something like that. Then typically, one of the questions you'll ask the client will be, how are you feeling mentally? Are you feeling mentally or emotionally overwhelmed or exhausted by something? Um, this could be a month for Capricorns where the question of what is overwhelming me mentally and emotionally, and maybe there's some need to eliminate some element of your life, some person, place, environment, job, relationship, that is really taxing or draining you. Because the Mars Neptune also tends to be very self sacrificial. And sometimes that's going to come with a high price where we give too much of ourselves or there's too much surrender or sacrifice on the behalf of others. And it starts to wear us out mentally or emotionally. So you really want to be careful of those themes this month. But also, the Mars Neptune conjunction in the third house will also have you joining your minds with other people potentially for the sake of some transcendent cause, mission, or vision. So you almost think of a little bit of like a Joan of Arc energy that is fueling your mental state this month. Visionary, imaginative, action oriented, but there could be a fantasy or the feeling of some kind of quest that you feel compelled to go on. So I would watch for that as well. This is a part of the eclipse. It'll play a role in the eclipse, but you'll see this intensifying after the eclipse between the 12th and the 13th. Now, we go forward from there a little bit later in the month. Around the 18th of the month, Mercury is stationing and is going to turn retrograde in your seventh house of relationships. And then by the 21st, there is a solar eclipse in your seventh house. Now, that's the place of relationships. This is why I said earlier that lunar eclipse in the 12th house is feeding right in also to the topic of relationships, love, and home and family. The new moon solar eclipse plants a seed. There could be, meeting someone new. Your life could be trending towards marriage and family. There could also be a theme of deep change happening in the life of a partner, or potentially also some theme of a new development, a new chapter of some kind, a new energy that's starting to take shape in the lives of family members that becomes a part of your social reality. For example, now I'm about to have a nephew or a niece, or I'm about to have a brother or sister-in-law, or where your life is being changed because of new developments happening, perhaps in the extended family somewhere. Anyway, the Cancerian eclipse in the seventh house is also happening as Jupiter and Pluto are in the process of conjoining in your first house. That conjunction will happen by the end of the month on the 30th. This means that there is a degree of tension right now between, who am I, where am I going in my life, what is important to me, what kind of changes am I trying to make, and what are the needs or demands of my family and those that I'm close to or love. And there could be some difficult choices that you have to make in balancing those factors out right now. So watch for that between the 18th and the 21st for the Cancerian energy, and then Jupiter conjoining Pluto by the end of the month in your first house. Now, the other major event of the month is further emphasizing this theme of home and family as really important for Capricorns. And the reason for that is that right around the 27th into the 28th, Mars, god of war and action, is going to enter the fourth house of home and family. Sometimes this means the chaos of moving. Sometimes this means fights or conflicts with family members or in the house. Sometimes it means renovating the house. Sometimes it means that old conflicts from the past are going to be brought up. But God of War entering the fourth house will stay in your fourth house now all the way until January of this year, with a long retrograde coming later in the summer. We'll explore that more in depth as the summer goes on. But just to give you a heads up, that the god of action and war and conflict, but also a god that really gets things done. Mars is in the fourth house of home and family now, all the way to the beginning of 2021. So that's what to watch for. Okay, we're going to wind this back, start all over, and put Taurus on the ascendant. So, of course, Taurus is ruled by Venus, which means that the Venus Cazimi that's happening at the very beginning of the month on June 3rd is going to be really powerful. And this Venus Cazimi that's happening on June 3rd, I have June 4th on the wheel right now. Let me change this. So if you put it back just a little bit, here we go. The Cazimi on June 3rd is in the second house, which is finances, resources, and money. This is where Venus has been retrograde since last month, and Venus will be in your second house of finances and money, resources from April all the way through August. So there is some kind of transformation of circumstances, probably overall very fortunate, though there may be an intermediate period of revising something about money and finances. Expect for a moment of clarity, a moment of breakthrough, and of empowerment around the topic of money and finances right around the 3rd of the month. Be careful of extravagant purchases, but otherwise this has the look and feel of the process that's been taking place in the second house for Taurus risings is reaching some kind of peak moment where where there might have been a breakdown on the front half of the cycle. Momentum is changing, and you should be starting to feel relief and start to feel the breakthrough of the whole Venus cycle in your second house of finances. This is an auspicious transit for sure. Now, you go to June 5th, and on June 5th, you've got a lunar eclipse in your 8th house, and it is opposite the Venus Sun energy in the second house, and T-squaring with Neptune and Mars in the 11th house. Now, this is a very powerful configuration happening between the 8th and the second house, and then the 11th. The lunar eclipse in the 8th house focuses on the place of debt, obligations, and resources that are tied to other people. For example, debt, taxes, loans, inheritance, or a spouse or partner's financial situation, as well as you could call it sometimes a house of shared resources. It's also in general a place of karmic obligations, things that we owe other people owe us. And so a lunar eclipse in this house suggests culmination, resolution, completion of something. It would not be surprising to see people paying off debts, or for there to be some deeper changes involved in the financial dynamics of your important relationships. This is happening, of course, at the same time that your own personal financial situation is changing dramatically and probably for the better. But it's also being influenced by the collective energy of Mars and Neptune in the 11th, which is, I would call it, a we-centered vision. What are your energy, your resources, your money, finances? What are they being put into? How are they influenced or shaped by larger collective concerns? How are you using your energy or resources to support things that are bigger than yourself? At the same time, so for example, you think almost of a creative or professional collaboration, or you think of some larger use or vision for one's money, say something humanitarian or even charitable. But also potentially with Mars and Neptune in the 11th house, you have the potential for your energy, your resources to feel like they're being co-opted somehow. Like, hey, you should just give us all of your money because we're like, some churches. I've seen some mega churches where they say, just give us all of your money, and this is what will really bless you, or something like that. So and sometimes that's actually there's hidden, covert, kind of selfish agenda behind something like that. So the 11th house, Mars and Neptune, also has you envisioning the use of your resources, business, investments, maybe for something bigger, something more collective. But you do have to be careful and be very discriminating during this time, so you don't get kind of sucked into something that's somehow unreal or that would take advantage of you. And of course, it can go in the opposite direction too. You want to be careful that you're not taking advantage of others. So that is the eclipse energy. Very financial for Tauruses, I think, overall. Has a lot to do with money and finances. So let's see, we go on to the 18th into the 19th. And right around that time, what we're seeing is the eclipse energy. The next eclipse in the series is coming through. And that's going to be a solar eclipse in Cancer, just after Mercury has turned retrograde in Cancer. All of that is happening in your third house, the place of the mind, of media, technology, communication, learning, neighbors and siblings. There could be some very deep and substantive changes happening in the lives of close friends or family members. The third house was a house associated with brethren and kin, but also something happening in your local sphere of activities that's very new, maybe related to family members or your closer emotional bonds with people. But you could also see the need to creatively and more personally express or communicate something. There could also be a return to something from the past or a kind of nostalgia that's in the air. And also, again, with the solar eclipse so close to that North Node in Gemini in the second house, with Venus just finishing her retrograde, one would think that the potential for money or finances to tone this eclipse as well would be there, but maybe something to do with revising a digital or media strategy or something communicative that is connected to finances. For example, I could see someone saying, you know what, I'm going to revise the way in which if you have a small business, the way in which my offerings or my products or my services, I'm going to sort of redo them or something like that, and design a new marketing campaign or something that's kind of strategic mentally and organizationally, but it feeds back into business or finances on some level too. That would be a real possibility here. And again, that's because the node is just out of sign in the second house. So all right, so watch for those energies coming through between the 18th to the 21st, but you'll feel that effect all the way through the rest of the summer. Now, the other major transit is, of course, the 12th house Mars transit. Happens around the 27th into the 28th. Mars is going to enter Aries, where for Taurus risings, it will now be in your 12th house for a long time, all the way until the very beginning of 2021. You now have Mars, god of war, in the house of in the 12th house, which is a place that is associated with self-undoing, or that has a relationship to confinement, isolation, and potentially health problems, or even mental and emotional breakdowns. Not an easy place. It's a place that also has a long history of being associated with hidden enemies. So it's a heavy house. But one of the great things about Mars spending so long in your 12th house is that if you're someone who struggles with impatience, or you have a temper, or you work well, let's say, in isolation, or you work well alone, this can be a really productive long transit for people who work by themselves or who work independently, because it's putting Mars, god of action, in a place that's more solitary. So solitary work could be great. On the other hand, if you're someone who struggles with anger, impatience, if you kind of have a tempestuous temperament, the Mars retrograde in this house, which will be coming up and be part of this long stay of Mars in your 12th house, can be a time of very deep introspection and healing for people who struggle with anger, especially. You do have to be careful of getting into drama and unnecessary conflicts with people. That could be a lot more damaging or dramatic than you plan for with Mars in your 12th house for a while. But also, Mars rules your 7th house, which is a place of relationships. And so don't be surprised if any of the symbolism that we're talking about right now, or the struggles or difficulty, also involve a partner, a spouse, or your, let's say, romantic life in general. because Mars is the ruler of the 7th house of relationships in the 12th house for a long period of time, could spell some difficulties or deeper learning experiences around relationships, especially facing different kinds of frustrations or battles of will and ego in relationships. So watch for that too. All right, so that's what it is for the month. Oh, almost forgot. On the 30th, this is not something to forget. On the 30th, you've got Jupiter conjoining with Pluto in your 9th house. You've had Jupiter, Pluto, Saturn in your 9th house all year, and the Jupiter-Pluto conjunction coming back around means another moment of catharsis for you in relation to the higher mind, beliefs, religion, spirituality, learning. Sometimes the 9th house is associated with like universities or colleges, training programs, but also religion, spirituality, foreign countries, long journeys. There's some kind of deep cleansing, maybe purgative catharsis that's going to be happening again in the area of spirituality, religion, and so forth by the end of June. So watch for that energy to come through and it continue. It's been a year where the 9th house, that place of the higher mind and spirituality, has been really emphasized this year for Tauruses. So it comes back around to offer another kind of energetic, a moment of dynamism at the very end of June. So let's wind it back up and do it one more time. And this time we're going to put Virgo on the ascendant. So going for Virgos, it's a big deal because for all of the mutable signs this month, of course, the eclipses are falling in cardinal house, in your angular houses. And the angular houses are just very impactful when you get eclipses in them. So we'll preview that in a moment. First of all, you've got on the 3rd, the Venus Cazimi in your 10th house of career. You've been going through a total revision and transformation, ultimately positive, but maybe slogging through some changes with Venus retrograde in your 10th house of career, where it's been all of last month into this month. There's some kind of transformation happening there. Ultimately, positive, probably things going to start to look up for you. After Venus's Cazimi, Venus is going to start appearing as the morning star, announcing changes, and Venus brings good fortune, especially from the Cazimi moment forward. So watch for a real turning point here relative to a career transformation that you've been going through. Then when we go forward to the 5th, that's when the lunar eclipse comes through. And the lunar eclipse for you is in Sagittarius in your 4th house of home and family. It is, again, opposing Sun and Venus in your 10th house of career, creating a T-square with Mars and Neptune in your 7th house. Now, Mars and Neptune are going to conjoin exactly between the 12th and 13th of the month, but they're a part of this. So when you've got so many areas at once, let's break it down and try to, explain it piece by piece. So first of all, the lunar eclipse in the 4th house announces culmination, completion, and endings in relation to home, family, living environment, and so forth. There is a deep level of change and letting go that's happening here. Then we have at the same time, we have Mars and Neptune coming together in the 7th house, which could mean that the changes happening on the home front or around family, home, living environment are being catalyzed by a deeper level of change that's also happening in relationships. So the 7th house is the place of love and relationships, or your social life in a sort of general sense. Mars Neptune there is requiring some kind of sacrifice, or it's being fueled by some kind of vision. So what kind of situation would match this? Well, for example, I'm going to move out of my apartment and I'm going to move in with my boyfriend or my girlfriend or whatever the case might be. Or I'm going to move in together or into a certain kind of community with other people who share some kind of similar mission in life. Or as my career is changing, my relationships and my living situation are changing. It's 3 major areas, which is why these eclipses are such a big deal for any of the mutable signs. For Virgo, you've got it in your 10th house with Venus retrograde. Big changes happening there. Eclipses in your 4th house of home and family. And then the energy pressing in between Neptune and Mars in the 7th house. How much of yourself do you want to give to someone or something else or something bigger? And how much of this, let's call it a vision, a fantasy, or a mission, Mars Neptune, that involves other people is driving choices or changes that are happening both at work and at home. That's how I would summarize it. Okay, so go forward from there, and later in the month, at about the 18th and 19th of the month, Mercury is going to station, turn retrograde in Cancer in your 11th house, and then on June 21st, there's going to be a solar eclipse in Cancer in your 11th house. So the 11th house, very, very important this month for Virgos. And it goes back to what we were saying about Neptune and Mars in the 7th. The 11th house is a place of groups, friends, community. Cancer is all about home and where we feel that we belong or where we feel safe. A solar eclipse introduces something new, a new chapter, a new door opening. This has to do with community, friends, groups of people, and the potential for there to be some mission or vision driving changes professionally, relationally, domestically, where you live, and so forth. But it comes back to people, family, community, tribe, and vision or mission. It's going to be a big part of this. So, the need to reach out if you have been more, let's see, if you've been isolated, the need to, and I don't mean just from COVID-19, I mean, if you've been isolating yourself or cutting yourself off from the people that you ought to be connected with somehow, you're going to probably feel that quite dramatically this month. So the need to connect with our emotional base, our emotional roots, and how that manifests, especially in terms of groups of friends, people, colleagues, family members, and so forth. Now, on the 27th of the month, you're going to see Mars move into Aries. And for you, that's going into your 8th house. This is going to be a theme between, the end of June and the very beginning of 2021. It lasts that long. It goes all the way through the end of the year. That Mars is going to be in Aries, does a very long retrograde in Aries. So it's a very empowered Mars. But it's in your 8th house, which is a place of contractual karmic obligations and debts that we have to other people that other people have to us. So a deeper level of conflict, action, and change with more intensity, and it's a little bit more of a belligerent energy, probably, having to do with the topic of your your karmic contracts. Let's call them soul contracts. This is, for example, when things need to be terminated or cut off, relationships that need to be severed and ended. Mars in the 8th house will emphasize that over the next 6 months. If it's, things that you owe other people that you've been procrastinating on emotionally or spiritually or financially, the impetus to take care of something that you need to do that is owed to someone else, paying off bills or debts emotionally, karmically, financially. Also, the potential for, let's say, a spouse or a partner to take some kind of strong actions with work or business or investments. You could see that as well. Could become the source of conflict, money or finances in relationships, but also could indicate just, a partner starting a business or someone that's close to you inviting you into some kind of new initiative or collaboration. But it would be a little risky and it would require a lot of work or action on your part, probably. So those are just some ideas. Now, by the 30th of the month, Jupiter will conjoin with Pluto in your 5th house. That is the place of children, of recreation, joy, pleasure, procreation, pregnancy, sex, also a place of creativity. The Jupiter-Pluto conjunction there is very cathartic. You have to be careful of the energy of hedonism, meaning just overly selfish, where it's like overspending, overeating, overdoing something. Jupiter-Pluto can be also about releasing some kind of pent-up energy. If you tend to, work, and never take care of yourself, Jupiter-Pluto conjunction in that 5th house will sometimes be, the moment where you finally break out of your shell, but it can almost be like destructive. Like you think about those, like a funny movie where the nerd who always studies finally gets drunk at the senior party or something. The potential for there to be some tremendous release of pent up energy, overly productive, overly controlled, overly rigid, and then just explosive in the house of pleasure and fun, like that. You want to be careful of that kind of. Don't get too, if you feel pent up, be careful, because it could really bubble over and be more destructive this month. If you need to like relax, or just find a creative outlet, or find some joy and happiness, don't wait until the volcano blows. But on the other hand, this is also a moment of catharsis, creatively or sexually or in relation to your children, that could be very healing, if not like Jupiter Pluto, a little destructive at first, or a little chaotic at first. So those are some of the big energies to watch for if you're a Virgo rising. So that is what I've got for you Earth signs this month. I look forward to hearing from you all. Please tell me your stories and share them with me as the month is going on, or how you can already see perhaps some of these themes fitting. I am out of town at the moment with family, just quarantined now, but with a few more family members, and it's been nice. It's been a nice change of pace. But that's why you're not seeing me in my office this month. I'll be back shortly. And I hope you're doing well and keeping safe and sound, and that as the month goes on, we'll be sure to check into all of these transits individually, and make sure that you check out my overview for the month of June as well. All right, take it easy, everyone.